first of all, huge congratulations on the award of Tug Personality of the Year. Very much deserved, and an absolutely fantastic career. First of all, Merchant Navy, I think I'm right, then into the Royal Navy, then into harbour mastering, and then into the MEIB. But what sort of one thing would you bring out from that experience to say, what were the trends, and what would you maybe hand over to the next generation from all of that? Big question, I know.
I think it is a big question, but I think when I look back at the way we did things in the 1970s, it was a very different world at sea. Things like safety management systems were a twinkle in someone's eye. The captain's orders were a small booklet that you briefly read and then probably ignored, and then you did what others did around you. And to be honest, the technology we were working with was very, very basic. It was very, very rudimentary. I worked on general cargo ships. It was topping, lowering, derricks, all the usual stuff. And then I look at the ships I commanded and the ships that I operated within our ports towards the end of my career in the MOD, and the technological change has been fundamental. And if I look at the sort of commercial world as well, the safety procedures, the other bits and pieces of standardisation, my instincts are things have got safer. I think things are improving. I'm hopeful. I'm very much half full, not half empty on that front. I think if I was to give one piece of advice, it would be, in my time as an inspector with the Marine Accident Investigation Branch, I think it's look at the small incidents and accidents in your organisation. There's a thing called Heinrich's Triangle. I think it's from the 1930s, and it's 300 minor incidents or near misses lead to one very serious marine accident. And I think if you can analyse and look into those small things that go wrong and put things in place to make them right, hopefully, and I strongly believe you'll avoid the big incidents. So I think look at the small things, get them right. And I think if I was to give one thing for the headmark for the future is when I look at safety management systems, and we would get a lot of them when we're doing investigations, we get full safety management systems. I inadvertently pressed print on one, and I think I blew up the printer because it was thousands of pages long.
Yeah.
When I look at the aviation world, they've managed to get the cockpit sort of check-off cards for an A380, I think, to 49 pages. So I think sometimes you need to have a safety management system that's comprehensive. What your workforce use at sea, if you can make that succinct and something they use daily and are familiar with, then I think you're going to make your workplace a lot safer.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that's a good point. But just to pick up two things. First of all, on these small things, and I agree with that point of view. Well, is there any sort of one particular trend that you've seen over the last 20, 30 years that is getting, I suppose, more prominent? Bearing in mind that we are changing technology and the problems are not the same, but there are still problems there.
I think it's a very difficult question to answer, but I think the ability for the small team you have on a tug to work together is absolutely key. If you look at the size of a traditional tug in the 1970s, the crew would probably have been 5 or 6. Now you're down to a crew of 3, maybe even 2 on certain classes of vessel. And it's the ability for everybody to be actually operating in harmony together. You've also got rotating rosters and other bits and pieces, so you've got people coming on watch, on duty with different individuals, and what you want them to do is operate within a common framework. And I would say, in the past, things were more stable and probably less frenetic. I use that in sort of manning terms. Whereas in the modern world, you've got to adapt to that commercially or driven in certain directions. But by having common procedures, you can iron out a lot of the wrinkles with having changing crew composition.
I do agree with that. And in terms of technology changes, so here we are, we were chatting earlier, but here we are sitting in a fantastic simulator, and you and I worked in a very old simulator in the mid-90s, and the technology changes are fantastic. But the other thing we were saying earlier was you're probably becoming less certain as you get older and you get more experience. Do you think there's a link between the technology becoming more advanced and us becoming maybe less certain?
I was using the less certain in sort of the investigation. When I go out to see an investigation, you go out with some preconceived ideas and you have to learn to put them behind you and approach it with an open mind. I've never attended an accident where individuals set out for things to go wrong. They set out with the best of intentions, and tragically, in many cases, we had the worst of outcomes. I think stimulation is really, really powerful. And I think if you and I reflect on the way simulation was used in our time in the Navy, when we started off, we used it exactly the same sort of way we were using the ships that we used to train. Literally, the simulator did a trot along the south coast with people doing navigational exercises as they went. When I left my time in command, that's not the way I used to simulate. I used the simulator to do things that were dangerous, that I really did not want to experience at sea, that I wanted to rehearse myself and my team in how to respond to those emergencies. So if I give you an example, I remember distinctly, we'd been alongside the big maintenance field, and we were going to sea for the first time for a long time. We had a couple of hours in the simulator before we went. We did that departure from our home port in good visibility, bad visibility. We had steering gear breakdowns. We had loss of propulsion. All the things. I think we're looking at the picture of the Dahlia approaching the bridge in the United States. And what you want is when those things happen, you don't want it to be for the first time. But at sea, in a real platform, doing a real job, you don't want to exercise the mind because the consequences can be extreme.
Yeah.
And I think simulation gives you the benefits of doing that. So I think it's incredibly powerful. And I think the way the aviation industry uses it, and the way I think many shipping lines and ports now use their simulation, is a really powerful way of preparing people. So when things do go wrong, which will occasionally happen, we can constrain that risk so that the consequences are not extreme.
Yeah, and a career, Bill, spanning 47 years. Obviously, you started in school.
Yeah.
But and apart from the time when you and I worked together in 1995, 96, are there any other highlights that you wanted to bring out from that?
I think there are two. I mean, whenever you reach the pinnacle of your career and you get command of your own ship, obviously that's going to be something that's exciting. You feel like you've climbed on every rung of the ladder to get to that point, and finally it's your ship. And I was lucky enough to have HMS Manchester. I think you were lucky enough to have Gloucester.
Yeah.
I was second in command of Gloucester Carpets, and they were fantastic ships. They had great ships companies. By the time you and I took command, the Navy had them in service for a number of decades, and people really understood how they worked. And the thing that gave me the most satisfaction was training the people who worked for me. And they've overtaken me in my naval careers, and one in particular, who's my female navigator, is now on her, I think, her 6th or 7th command in charge of a task group. And that, the legacy you leave behind, I'm sure it's mainly down to her hard work, not mine, but I feel a certain amount of pride in what they've gone on to achieve. My second one is the MEID. I think it's a huge job, much bigger than I realised when I started. You're dealing with people, because it's always the people you remember. You're dealing with people on probably the worst day of their lives, and you're seeing them in the circumstances they hope they never find themselves. And it's a very, very humbling experience. And to understand what happened, to analyse why, and to make recommendations to hopefully prevent other families going through similar tragedy is a real privilege, and one I've been very humbled by.
Yeah, that's really that's really warming too. That's good. And just I'll let you go soon because I know you want lunch. But the couple of final bits really is so you've been a fantastic friend to the maritime community, particularly the towage industry, which I've been for 3.5 years, and I think it's it's probably, well, it is true to say that my first phone call when I was told I had the job was to ring you, actually. And I can see I've always found you a very wise mentor and very good friend. But the award of Tug Personality of the Year, which of course as the chairman I was involved in, what does that mean to you? What does that bring to you halfway through your career, actually?
I think it's very, very humbling. I wasn't expecting it. It's, it is always, you're always very grateful to receive the recognition of others, and never more so when it's unexpected. But inevitably, it also highlights and you bring to mind those that helped you. And I couldn't have done it without those who helped to mentor me during my career at sea and in the harbours, and my colleagues at the MEIB, who quite clearly gave me tremendous support and a lot of expertise in the office. And I think the other thing is the tight-knit community around the marine community in the UK is stronger than anybody imagines. It's quite a neat little, I'm going to say club, but I don't mean to say it's exclusive. I mean to say it's just very, people know each other and they want to help. And that support from British Tugowners Association, the other professional organisations like Workboats, Maritime Coast Guard Agency, Pilots Association, Harbour Masters, Ports Association has been first class. Those professional associations, the collaborative way in which they operate is commendable, and I think we're very lucky to have them.
Good, thanks, Bill. Well, congratulations again. It's a fantastic achievement, and well done.
Well, thank you.
Good.